biggest outside event each year. And so it's just takes over is what it amounts to. They've been here for a lot of time recently, trying to get things set up. I will tell you, you can go ahead and put it on your calendar. May the 24th, we're back in here again. The bishop is here that day with the North Georgia retirees and ordinands, which is the two ends of the spectrum. Those who are being ordained as well as those who have retired. And so that's also a big event. So that's on May the 24th, we will be in here with it. One other helpful thing that you could do, I got an email from Kathy Brockman last night. We have a church member who is trying to get a chair picked up from the Mansions, which is up at the corner of Holcomb Bridge and yeah, got it. Yeah. So anyway, right there, Holcomb Bridge area with Spalding Drive, and then they need it relocated to a place over here off of Jet Ferry. And Kathy has all the detail. The challenge is it is a chair. It's going to take two people to carry it. We need a pickup truck or whatever to do it. And the challenge is it has to be done either today or tomorrow. And I think today is supposed to have some rain involved. If you would be available and willing to do that, Kathy Brockman would be who we need to talk to. So you can either tell me and I'll get you in touch with her, or if you can do it, you can contact her directly. But this is a senior adult woman in our church who obviously cannot move this herself. And she thought she had things set up and then it fell apart. So for what it's worth with that. All right, today we're going to do things a little differently. We're going to do some activity and conversation early on in the process here. But today we're going to focus on chapter 15 for this Sunday. And it's interesting, chapter 15 of the Gospel of Luke. And normally this would be the prodigal son's story. But interestingly this week, Phil's going to do it a little differently, as you would suspect Phil would. He can't ever do anything the way it's supposed to be done. And so the world's great as well. So anyway, he's going to use the middle part of the story, but I'm going to take it to the end of the story. And so we're going to spend some time today. But Luke, the chapter 15 of Luke is really the joy of finding the lost. This is that chapter that focuses on folks who are things that are lost. And the celebration that goes with that. And obviously the lost sheep. Well, interesting, it starts off the chapter with the Pharisees and all the church leaders being upset with Jesus. Surprise, surprise. They're upset with Jesus because Jesus is hanging out with lost people. He's hanging out with people that the rest of the religious people don't agree with and don't like to have around. One of the things that the church has had challenges with throughout history and time is that the church has often excluded people that don't fit in. And so this story begins with the first several verses of that story with that very conflict. And so the rest of this chapter is really talking about the joy of finding those or things that are lost as representations of that. So we first of all start with the lost sheep. And we know that story about leaving the 99 to go find the one. Then we have the lost coin, where the woman goes through sweeping the house looking for this coin, which is very valuable to her, is kind of all she has. And she goes through the house doing that. And of course, when she finds the lost coin, there's celebration with that. And then there's either 2 or 3 stories beyond that in this particular, it depended upon how you divide it up. First is the story of finding the lost son, what we often call the prodigal son. And that's in chapters or verses 11 through 16 with that. But I'm going to go on beyond that, which is finding the son who stayed behind, who stayed at home. How do you find someone that is at home? with it. And so we're going to spend some time on that today. But prodigal is interesting. What does prodigal mean? Did you look on you have a dictionary right there? Yeah, I see. Yeah, yep, got it. Well, it's interestingly, it is wastefully extravagant. It actually comes from Greek, but Latin works too. It's one of those ancient languages. Okay, very good. I believe you with that. I didn't take Latin. I did take Greek with that. But anyway, so prodigal means that he's wastefully extravagant. And so that's why we have the prodigal son. We have the son who goes away and wastes what he's been given with that. But it also is a matter of looking at the gift of love. And in the chapter that we have here is the finding the lost out of love. And so today I want us to spend the first few minutes thinking about those things that we can be thankful for, that God has given to us because of God's love for us. So on your tables, there is a little half sheet of paper. Some of you brought writing utensils today. Some of you did not. This is for your own preference. So use your phone if you would like to do that to make your list. But quickly as you would, make your list of the 10 things in your life right now to which you can be thankful to God for. And take about 3 minutes. It won't take long, hopefully. 10 things.
David, I'd like to make a comment about this, okay?
Okay.
So I hope everyone in there has this as part of their daily prayer. I've been for years, I've some greatest blessings in my life, and I've mentioned my prayer repertoire, and I hope everybody else will do something to really think about. You know, we ask for things, but we should really thank God for those greatest blessings in my life, and I have them written down on this sheet, whether or not I want to read them or not, but I have them on this sheet. So it's so important to do that.
Well, and that was my purpose with this morning. This is not something to share around the table at this point in time, but it is something for us to be conscious of. You know, coming off of Easter, as we have this past week, what greater gift can we be given? And what greater appreciation should we have for those things that God does for us. And so the gift of love that we have from God is something I hope we'll take with us, take seriously. Take this paper with you, keep it in your pocket, post it on your mirror, do something with it that will allow you to keep those things before, and maybe you add 10 more things to it each day. Maybe your list gets longer and longer of things that you can be thankful for each day. I do want to.
I had a hard time putting things on the list.
Yeah.
People.
Yeah, it is, and there's some of us that can rattle things off pretty quickly. Others of us have to ponder and think. And so do this at your leisure with this. The other thing I want us to spend some time doing, if we'll go to the next questions there, just around your table group, if you would, and if you need to combine with another table, that's fine. But let's take the next few minutes, next 5 to 6 minutes, or a little more if need be, and deal with these two questions. In your life right now, how have you taken God's love for granted? In your own life, have you taken God's love for granted? And when has God's love felt really real to you? What are those times in your life? Martin Buber talks about it from an I-thou standpoint. When we're so close to God, when God is so much a part of our life, so much a part of that particular instance that we have no doubt in our mind that we are in relationship with God at that point. So those two things, let's spend the next 6 minutes or so, if you would, around your tables.
Hey guys, can you hear me? All gentlemen on Zoom, good morning.
Morning.
Hey, so yeah, we're in the Asbury room today, but sort of have a discussion like this. I have to flip over from my podium to my laptop. So what y'all think in your life? How have you taken God's love for granted?
And it's hard to hear with people behind you.
Is there background noise? Check to make sure I got the right microphone here.
Are y'all in the Asbury room, Andy?
I hear you.
Okay, is that any better for the background noise? Probably not. Okay, I'm sorry.
I can hear you, but we can still hear the background.
Yeah, you just got to pretend you're here in the room. And everybody's talking at the table, so I'll see if I can get a better microphone for this, guys. My apologies.
Okay.
Anyhow, so how in your life have you taken God's love for granted?
I fail to be humble. Do not pray as often as I should, and don't give thanks often enough for all my blessings.
Yeah.
I couldn't hear myself.
Well, I think the thing that I realize when I sit down and think about it, we had this list of all the things to be thankful for. I finally stopped after I got to about 30. I realize that we are so blessed. Number one, as Americans, and number two, as residents of I have to say the state of Georgia, since I no longer live in Dunwoody, but everything that we have is way beyond the average measure, if you will.
And he said, how many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? Now, remember, he's slopping the hogs now at the point that he comes to himself. He's doing menial tasks at best. He is in places that most of us would not want to go and doing things that most of us would not want to do. But here I am dying of hunger. And if you remember, the story says he's you know, all he's got to eat is the old pods, the pea pods, basically, that he's given the hogs. And who knows where those have been. I will get up and go to my father. Now he's come to himself, which is, aha, things aren't going great. I need some assistance. He is going back to his father, whom he has claimed is dead. I'm going back to one that I have already put myself in a sundry with. So he has said he's dead. He also, he longs for that relationship. He doesn't say, I'm just going back to a familiar town. I'm going back to the village of where I was. I'm going back to find some friends. He says, I'm going back to the one who was always there for me, who was always the one that was going to care for me. And maybe we have had situations in our lives where that is what we had to do. We had to go back to whoever that figure was in our lives that we knew would be there for us, even after he maybe has renounced that person. I remember Catherine and I, as a young child, were in a situation at one point that we were over odds over something. And she, of course, had given me attitude. Of course, it was not my fault with that, but it was one of those things where we had just not really spent a whole lot of quality time together in the moment. And I will never forget, I drove her to the soccer game. I was one of the coaches on the team, and I was doing my job with everybody else, and she was kind of ignoring me. And in the midst of the soccer game, she got a soccer ball right flat face on her, to the point that it really kind of stunned her and knocked her down, which at this point, as a young child, she began to cry and whatnot. And she kept saying, all I want is my daddy. All I want is my daddy. And even though at the moment we might have been estranged, even though at the moment maybe that's not what she had said on the way to the game, you know, the reality is when we get in situations that are tough, we want to know that there are people in our lives that we can count on. And so he wants to go to his father. And I will say to him, you know, here's the speech that he practices, if you remember. Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands. And so he kind of keeps saying that over and over. And we have this image in all the stories I've ever had of this, and all the Bible and reenactments of this experience that I've ever had is that just continuous speech being played over in the tapes. And you change the word, you wordsmith it on the way there so that, you know, it says exactly what it is that you want to say to get the sympathy, the empathy, the support that you need along the way. And also, at this point, if he has truly found himself, is what can I do to really make amends? What can I do to sincerely humbly say that I am repentful. I am, at this point, I want to be your child, or I want to at least be in your presence with that. So he sets off and he went to his father. But while he was still far off, and this is what we love about this story, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. Father's always looking for him. He has been told, I'm leaving home. Don't count on me. You're dead. I'm never coming back. But yet the father constantly looked and waited for him. And so it says the father saw him and was filled with compassion. And then he ran. Now, running is not something that's very usual for older men. Some of us can remember the last time we ran, or that we ran regularly, or we were in a situation with blood. It's not dignified in most cultures that men would run. And so, but the father ran to meet him, and he put his arms around him and he kissed him. And then the son said to him, this speech, I've been working on this speech. I've got it all down. Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. So I have turned myself away from God. I have turned myself away from you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. No longer worthy. Ever felt unworthy in your life? Maybe we've had those difficult times where we were not worthy, or at least we felt like we were, and those around us maybe felt that way about us for a time. Maybe it was a longer time than we would have wanted. But being unworthy is a very difficult and challenging place to be. But the father said to his slaves, quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. The father never forgot him. He had this thing where he says, I want to be, okay, don't count me as your son because I've already discounted you, but let me be a hired hand. Now, there are some theologians that think pretty critical of what the prodigal says at this point. He comes back and says, I want to be here, but I want to be a hired hand so you'll pay me. It's not, I want to be a slave. I don't want to be indebted to you. And if you remember, you've heard Matt and us talk about it before, where, part of being a slave was not necessarily because of an indentured servant and such, is really what kind of it is. You're in debt to the person that holds you accountable for that debt. And so maybe you have been a part of a conquering people who has taken over an area, and you become a slave because you have been inscribed by them to work for you, because you have been dominated. You have been taken over. And for that reason, you owe me at this point. But a lot of times it had to do with being in debt to somebody. It had to be being accountable to somebody because of what the circumstances have found ourselves to be. So finally, he's able to think clearly. He comes home, he's lost, but in the midst of that, he says, I just want to be here with you, but don't count me as your son, just count me as a hired person. But one of the things about being a hired servant is that you could be fired at any time. If it didn't work out, the dad didn't have to keep you around. As a hired servant, you could be let go like any other servant would be. So there is some potential here of it not working out. But the father says to the hired servants, to his folks, he says, first of all, bring him a robe. We want to make sure he is clothed correctly. And bring the best one, not just the old bathrobe in the back, but bring the robe. Give him the family ring, the one that has the seal on it, so he can be a part of the family. Put sandals on his feet so he can walk with dignity. And then let's find that fatted calf. Let's have a meal. Let's celebrate. So a lot of things are done over meals to build relationships and to build opportunity for growth from there. And then we move on to the next part of the story, beginning with the 25th chapter, or verse, not chapter, 32nd verse. Now his elder son was in the field. And when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He's outside. He's working where he usually is out in the fields with that. He's doing the chores that go along with being a part of, and maybe his chores are management. Maybe as the oldest son is really him as a supervisor as much as he is working the field himself. And when he came and he approached the house, he heard the dancing, the singing and the dancing and the music and all of that's going on, the noise of going on. And immediately as he called to one of the slaves, one of the people that works there, and asked him what's going on. And he replied, "Your brother has come and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has got him back safe and sound." Safe and sound. That sounds good, doesn't it? One of the things about being lost and being found is that it creates a safe environment for us. It creates an opportunity that we can breathe a sigh of relief. It gives us an opportunity where we can feel comforted as a part of that. And so it came back safe and sound. And then the son, the older son, became angry. And he refused to go in. And this is where he begins to be a prodigal himself. He begins to reject the father himself. He is lost from that. He has taken what has been given to him and he begins to waste it by creating awkwardness in his relationship with his dad. So his father came out and he began to plead with him. But he answered his father, "Listen, for all these years, I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never, ever, 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 ever given me anything." Ever heard something like that before? Everybody gets to do it but me. You don't ever do things nice for me. And yet, he's well cared for. He has position. He has inheritance. He has a future. His father has continued to love him through all of this. And I never, ever disobeyed a command. I've never done anything to cause you to have problems with me. Yet you have never given me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. And obviously a sacrificial goat, a young goat is he's saying that's not as good as having a fatted calf. You haven't even given me a lower level barbecue. You know, instead of having a whole calf that we have barbecued and we made a big deal. I mean, we haven't even had hot dogs and hamburgers. And here it is, you're providing this for your son who has been terrible. So anyway, yet you have never given me a young goat so that I might celebrate. But when this son of yours came back, that son, not my brother, that son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes. Ever heard anything about prostitutes before here? You know, how does he know that? What is it? So he's kind of, you know, maybe he's exaggerating at this point. All he knows is he squandered everything. He has given away extravagantly, wastefully what is there. He's been hanging out with prostitutes and you've killed the fatted calf for him. Then the father said to him, "Son, you are always with me." Now it's interesting that the word son here, a lot of times I hear that read derogatorily. You know, as if son, you know, is, you know, but the word son here that's in Greek is actually the word for child, a precious child. And if I remember correctly in my Greek, the word here that's used is the same one that Jesus used when he talked about the children. Bring the children to me. It's the same root word that there. So he's talking about, you're my precious child. This is not a derogatory thing at all, but you're always with me. You're always in my heart. I always love you. I always care for you. And all that is mine is yours, which it already is. He's already divided the inheritance. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found. The interesting thing, if you go back to the very beginning of this chapter, I mentioned to you the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes and all the religious people are complaining because Jesus is associating with people that they don't like, people that they don't feel are worthy. And yet we have here the brother doing the same thing, the brother demeaning his son. And instead of celebrating his coming home and being safe, he comes up with all the reasons why this guy's a scumbag. Why is it that he has been like this? So the older brother is also exaggerating here, feeling that he has been wronged. But in the midst of that, we need to celebrate for any of those who have come home and have been found. Yes.
Maybe the older son never felt like he was told that by his father.
Well, and maybe that is, the other side of the story is maybe there, yeah. And maybe that is part of it, is that we don't know the rest. We don't have the Paul Harvey rest of the story. We don't have what was the relationship before? Did they get along great? Did they not get along great? Did he actually love it? My experience, any of you the oldest child, my experience, at least in observation as the second oldest middle child in my family, is that the old one always feels like they've carried the burden for the whole family for eternity.
Because we do.
And so what we're hearing is not necessarily unusual in family relationships. Maybe somebody feels like everybody past them has gotten all the free rides on everything for what they have had to endure. And maybe that's part of what's going on with the older brother here too. But it also, again, the analogy looking here is what others, we often exaggerate how bad things are. We often don't appreciate necessarily what we have been given. Maybe he's never had a chance to find and understand what home really is because he's never been away from it. Maybe he just hasn't had a chance, like now the younger brother has had, to really appreciate what he has had and how his life has been done. Sometimes we don't appreciate it until we go. I remember now going to college, and sometime my mom, I found it after my mom died, a letter that I had written to my mom and dad back when, remember letters? Remember those? You fold them up, put them in the mail, somebody picks them up, takes them to your house with that. And, it was a real eye-opening experience for me to go away to college and to be with people who were from different places, who experienced life culturally differently than I had, who had different relationships with parents. And not that I ever really took it for granted, but I had never seen it exaggerated so much by the stories I heard of others about their families. And so I wrote my mom and dad a letter, and I just thanked them for all that they had done and for the sacrifices they had made, the values that they had given to me, all the things that made me at that point in time who I was. And it was, a heartfelt letter on my part, and maybe something I had never said to them the way that I did at that point. And evidently it made an impression because my mom kept it all those years. So maybe that's part of what's going on with the older brother too. Maybe he just hasn't had an opportunity to really understand what he really has if he has stayed and he has worked and been a part of that. So anyway, we have just a few minutes for questions. With that, you might want to pick one out of this group. When in life have you been the loving father and welcomed someone home from that perspective? Share a time when you felt like the older brother, when someone received something he or she didn't deserve. What were your feelings? How were they expressed? And which of the following statements do you think would be said by the older brother? That person doesn't deserve it. I've been good all my life. Life isn't fair. God isn't fair. Strangers are welcome here. Talk amongst yourself for a few minutes. We got about 5 minutes.